interviewed, admitted, and got to see through an entire year. So they have a special place in my heart. And in fact, there are 32 total graduates, and it seemed only fair to break them up in thirds for each of us to talk about a third of that class. But when Maria asked me, so which ones do I get? I said, I love them all. But given that there are twice as many secondary as elementary, I'll say that we'll try and keep our comments half as long. Does that feel good? So, I'd like to have some more after. Drew, you have been such a quiet, reliable presence in our group. You were the person that we could turn to. You're the person who came to every open house for the incoming cohort, and we have students coming this year, largely because they had student representation. You were solidly there for all of us, and you would think that somebody who has this sort of quiet, reliable presence would be a little stoical, but you have this wonderful sense of humor, and the moment that I'm going to take with me is when you showed the clip of Jim Carrey in Dumb and Dumber as a way to help us all understand the importance of precision in language in mathematics. And it was a seamless transition to sort of think in a humorous way, but also about what it means to take language seriously in a math classroom. And again, if you think about what that means, empowering students and their language, as Drew said in his presentation, very, very diplomatically, he likes the noise. He likes the student talk in the classroom. And he was in a classroom where students were not used to being allowed to talk with each other about mathematics, or much of anything, I don't know. They were very, very polite. And you opened up that space for them. You opened it up for us. So thank you so much. Rachel Dillon. So I got to teach all of the secondary students, but I particularly got to focus on the English ed people, and so if I get all weepy, then hold it together. Rachel, you took on so much this year in every way. It is much less common in the secondary program for students to do a BA MAT, the dual degree. And Rachel came to us not having gone through the traditional teacher ed path, but having taken a number of urban education classes, critical theory classes, and you brought that to your students. You brought that critical thinking to your students. So if you can imagine in Rachel's classroom, she taught her students how to use critical theory and how to use literary theory to analyze literature, which is a pretty big ask of students, and she did it all with cartoons. So, and you asked, as you said in your presentation, you asked your students to think hard, not just about their own learning, but you opened yourself up to have them look hard at your teaching. And constantly taking on more and deepening, so when the rest of our secondary educators are expected to take on 2 classes full-time, Rachel's school said, actually, you'll do 3. She said, okay. And she stepped up and took it on. She did a thesis at the same time that she was doing a master's degree in creative writing, and she's going to continue the creativity, I know, in teaching in a performing arts school in New York. Rachel, you've been such a gift to all of us, and I know that I'm going to miss you. And I remember a couple of moments very early on last summer. summer, you had said to me while you were taking foundations classes and classes about big ideas about social policy and race and who we are as teachers in this world, you said, there's a lot of feelings conversation going on. But then, one of the first questions that you asked the group in the fall was, you said, how can I build more personal relationships with my students? How can I know them more deeply? And you weren't sure that you were seeing how to do that and your peers engage with that. Well, come the spring, when I saw your work and heard how you talked about your students, and anyone who saw Anna's research presentation, you put the students at the center of the work. Their questions that they asked went up on the board and you engaged with them. The lesson that I saw where you were showing them sort of horrible cuckoo behavior and kicking birds out of nests. The kids were wrapped. They were absolutely engaged. And those relationships were not just personal relationships, but they were relationships about the questions of science and the questions that the students brought to the work. And we're very willing to say, I don't know, but we can find out. So when I see that trajectory, that group, and maybe even about feelings, I feel incredibly impressed. So thank you for bringing that to us.
Had been working as an advisor and operations manager for the Worldwide Fund for Nature in Switzerland when she decided that she wanted to teach the Chinese language. Thinking about her own education in China, she realized that education is not entirely about knowledge and grades, but also about life skills, morals, and compassion. And indeed, when she did her internship at Bigelow Middle School in Newton, this articulate and thoughtful educator researched whether or not technology is a silver bullet for teaching and learning Chinese. What she did learn is that she has a passion for teaching the Chinese language to children with whom she connects. When she returns to Beijing in a week or two, I am indeed hopeful that she will reach her goal of becoming a Chinese language teacher and having an incredible impact on her students. Another very talented teacher of Chinese. I had the pleasure of teaching her in 2 courses when she was a Brandeis undergraduate with a double major in Education Studies and International and Global Studies. Yuting had 2 very important experiences among her other experiences as an undergrad. First, she spent a summer teaching in a poor rural school in China, which motivated her to enroll in the MIT so she could learn better how to teach. She also did explored research in the Education Studies capstone course, which motivated her to apply to a doctoral program. And she will be entering the Social Science and Comparative Education doctoral program at UCLA, where we know she will also make good use of her teaching skills.
If you saw Laura's presentation, or if you've known her for 5 minutes, you know that Laura could do anything. And she came to us, Laura came to us already very successful. She had begun a doctoral program in anthropology psychology. She had been a successful writing teacher at Brandeis at the college level for 10 years. And in fact, when I told one of my colleagues that she was coming to us to do the MAT, she said, "Laura John, she's a legend." And so we were delighted, and I thought, okay, before I met her, she's somebody, she'll do like a super duper AP 12th grade, because she's been teaching college. And Laura said, "I want to do middle school." And I asked why. I don't remember if you said this. You said you wanted to engage your diorama skills. And the truth is, though, that you actually brought this really deep and rich understanding of ancient history to your sixth graders. And it wasn't about, although there was the orange that you mummified, but it wasn't about words of the past. It was about thinking hard with them, getting them to think hard, and to make connections. I remember you talking about Cleopatra as a strong woman of color, and sort of how to make that real for your students. We've been so lucky, all of us, I think, would say, that Laura brought her critical eye to our program. You turn a critical eye, I think, to everything that you touch, no more strongly than you do to yourself in your own teaching. But it makes all of us better at what we do. And I personally am so grateful for all the wisdom that you have shared with me as a teacher, that I have grown, how much I've grown from learning from you. So thank you. Jen Lang. Jen came to us, another person came to us with a million different skills and probably could apply anywhere. She came to us having had a background in finance and accounting, and she decided to come and teach Chinese in particular. And when Jen first entered the middle school, she would say about her little ones, she would say, "They're crazy. I don't think I can teach these little ones. They're crazy. They're all over the place." And she was right. She was, and they had a ton of energy. But the other day, when you and I were talking about your year, you referred to your students as angels. And I don't think that the kids changed that much from being crazy to angels, but if they did, I think it was a lot about what you did with them and how you built a culture in your classroom that moved all of that craziness to a place where it was a productive way of learning Chinese. And when I came to visit you, you had kids in pairs, and they were talking, and then they were sitting on the rug, and then they were up again and moving around, and what might have just been chaos or craziness became a way for them to learn and for you to help them grow and learn. So I'm impressed by the growth that you made in your understanding of them, but I'm also impressed by the growth that you made in your students in bringing them along. And even if your future students are not always angels, I imagine that you are going to have them deeply, deeply engaged in their learning. Thank you for that. Caroline, I got to watch you teach last week, teach the incoming students to the MAT, and was so moved. And all the graduating English students taught lessons to the incoming students, and I was particularly in wonderment about the way that you took on that class, because when you first started, I remember us having conversations in which you said, who am I to teach English? Who am I to teach these students? I could know so much more. There's so much more I should know and should be able to do. And who am I to teach these students? They have so much that they know and that they bring. And by the end, by last week, when you were teaching our incoming teachers, you had such, not just such poise, but the wisdom gleaned and the reflection from that year. And when I think about the moment when you were first thinking about teaching To Kill a Mockingbird, and how could you possibly get students to engage with the really rich elements in this text? And then last week, when an incoming student asked, how much can middle schoolers actually really think about big ideas? Caroline was able to tell them genuinely they can. And the way that her students engaged with questions of justice and injustice were so deep and so thoughtful. And yes, you were the one who had so much to give and so much to enrich them with, but you also realized that they could teach and teach each other and teach you. And that combination is going to be so powerful as we move into your next position. Caroline's school wanted to keep her there, so they are. And she will be doing work with students in that school who are particularly struggling or have special needs of some kind or English language learners. And that one-on-one attention, that valuing of the assets that students bring is going to be such a gift to that school. They need you so desperately, and you're going to make such a huge difference. Ling Ling. I can always count on you to be prepared to think deeply about what we're doing. Just the other day when we were having kind of an end of the year reflection about what we had learned through the year together, Ling came in with a list, all prepared for this fairly casual conversation. And I was looking back through our conversations, and one that I remember deeply is right before winter break, when everyone should have been scattering and not thinking about teaching at all. Ling made a special appointment to come in and talk with me about how to engage her students in something we had been studying, productive talk. How can we increase the language responsibilities of students in the classroom? And we had been talking about discussions, but Ling was teaching Chinese, and the students have so little vocabulary. How can you have a whole class discussion when they know so few words? But you wanted to figure this out, and you wanted to figure out how to help students bring their own voices, and not just rote memorization, to create language, to create sentences. And so she came in right before winter break, and we had a talk about what that actually meant. And when I think about that, and then I got to watch you in your classroom, get the students talking to each other. There were like 4 different activities in 5 minutes. They were talking to each other and engaging in Chinese. Then they moved and they walked around in a circle, and then they came back. And those students were creating language. They were using language in authentic and meaningful ways. And it wasn't regurgitation of what you had taught them or memorization. They were engaging and building language and building relationships through language. And that is a tremendous, tremendous accomplishment. Thank you, Lynn. Sarah Millette. Sarah, what are we going to do without your smile? From the first moment that we had Sarah in our cohort, she was a source of boundless optimism and boundless enthusiasm, to the point where when we had all only known each other for a week, she brought her banjo to our retreat. And Sarah inspired all of us, modeled for all of us, ways of bringing joy to whatever we did and putting yourself out there. If you saw Sarah's research presentation, you know that she began with students asking a question or noting all we ever do is worksheets. And you have to get a little context for this because Sarah was working at Newton South High School, which is a pretty high-power high school, known in the state of Massachusetts and probably beyond. And Sarah was working with kids who didn't fit that high-power model. And those kids were getting worksheets. And Sarah was bound and determined to have them love and engage in physics in the way that she loves and engages in physics. And the day that I visited, you had them all have straws, and they were looking at frequency, I think, with their straws. She had them hold up their straws and solemnly swear that they were not going to use them inappropriately. And then I walked around and these kids are thinking about frequency and the sounds that different straws make. She had her kids do egg drop activities. She was engaging them in really deep thinking about physics in wonderful ways that are not just worksheets. And that joy and that enthusiasm and that modeling of how we can all love science deeply inspired a lot of kids who want to be more engaged. And Sarah is another person whose schools would not let her go. And again, at a pretty high-power high school, to hire a novice teacher to teach physics is an extremely high compliment. But you are going to make a major difference in that school as well.
David is a young man who loves chemistry. He majored in chemistry as an undergrad here at Brandeis. He decided to become a teacher to share his enthusiasm for the subject with his students at Framingham High, where he did his internship. David is a thoughtful, knowledgeable, and caring student who is always willing to help his colleagues in the MAT program. He was able to make good personal connections while working to figure out the puzzle of classroom management and culture. We look forward to David's contributions as a science educator, where he can convince others of the passion he has for chemistry. Congratulations.
Sonia Newberger. Sonia, you have known what you wanted to teach and what you wanted to learn from the first moment. And you have put teaching and learning higher for yourself and for others above all. And it's been so impressive. When Sonia came to us, she has a background in chemistry, and she went and visited a number of different schools, met a number of different mentor teachers, and knew that she wanted to be with Becca Lewis, who's in the room. And when Becca said, well, mostly I'm going to be teaching biology, Sonia had to think about that really hard and decide that she felt she needed to give herself the most challenging and strongest learning experience she could. And if that was going to be in biology instead of chemistry, she was going to push herself that direction. So again, her own teaching and her own learning. I think I secretly knew at that point, and you did not know yet, that Sonia was also getting herself into a full-time job because her mentor was pregnant. And that meant that Sonia, instead of taking on teaching responsibilities in January, February, like everyone else, started teaching when, I don't know, Labor Day, I don't know. And Sonia stepped up and again put that teaching and learning right in the front and really creating space for her students' thinking. And maybe I think came a little earlier than we thought, not much, a little bit. And so by March, Sonia was a full-time teacher of record, teaching a full load of bio and chemistry with her mentor texting her every day, true, but on her own. And she didn't have a lot of colleagues in the space where she was working. So Sonia was really on her own trying to figure out her teaching and her learning. And she sought out ways to learn more, to grow further, and to push her students' thinking. The day that I visited, she had them thinking about a concept in 3 or 4 different ways, in using multiple modalities, and again, always putting that teaching and learning at the center. So Sonia, unlike most first-year teachers, I think is going to have a cakewalk next year. You've already been a full-time teacher in the Boston Public Schools, kind of on your own. So yeah, I think next year's going to be pretty cool. So Jamie just said, I'd like to see you try to embarrass me, because Jamie is so willing to put himself out there. Jamie's the one, we would have a guest speaker, and everyone was a little tentative, who is this person, and they would ask a question, and there would be crickets. Jamie would always dive in. Jamie would be the one making sure that the conversation continued, and often with kind of a groaner joke. There were a number of those. But your very first day of the MBT program, I think it was, during orientation, I said something about adult learning or being in loco parentis. And Jamie, you said, I'm not ready to be an adult. I'm not an adult. I'm not ready to be an adult. Fast forward to the spring, and Jamie's mentor teacher had a family emergency and needed to leave the country for a number of weeks. And Jamie stepped in and stepped up. And he wasn't just in lieu of parents for that group, because these were AP students headed for an exam, and it was a high-pressure situation. He took over for his mentor, and he stepped up. And this is also in a space where, like Sonia, when Jamie said to me at one point, I'm supposed to teach an AP environmental science, and Jamie knows everything there is to know about biology, but you felt like you were not prepared. You remember you came in and you said, I don't know how to take over that class. Jamie, I think if you give yourself a week to learn everything you need to know about environmental science, you are going to be able to teach those kids. And amazingly, you did. And you took over, and not only did you teach them, you had them asking questions that were not about the AP test, that were about real issues, and you had them deeply engaged. So congratulations.
Rachel Schubert.
So I really wasn't sure where to start in singing Rachel's praises. And neither is anyone else, really. Her field instructor came to me at one point and was looking at the form she had to fill out, and it basically says, areas for reinforcement, things you're doing well, areas for refinement, things, ways that you need to grow. And she said, well, what if I can't find any areas for improvement? This was in the fall. So and your mentor teacher said the same thing. She said, I don't have to do any work with Rachel. We sit down to have a reflective conversation. She's asking all the questions already. She's asking herself the hard questions. She said, I learned from Rachel. She made me a better teacher. What is there to say? And yet, the thing about Rachel is that just yesterday, the day before, Rachel said to me, said that you had come in to this program thinking you were going to learn teaching skills, lesson planning, unit planning, and then you had learned so much more about teaching and learning through the whole year. And I said, you came in that way. Rachel came in asking all the deep questions. No matter what we were talking about, we might be talking about an instructional strategy, jigsawing, or question asking, and your questions were always about, but what does this mean in terms of equity in the classroom? What does it mean in terms of student voice in the classroom? What does it mean about increasing the intellectual work that students are doing? What does it mean about the power dynamic in the classroom? You always grounded those very specific teaching strategies in those big questions of social justice. And you were in a place where, again, you were not always seeing the modeling about social justice-oriented teaching that you wanted to see, but you brought that model, and you taught that model, and you made that happen. And I can't believe you're going to be 2 hours away, because what are we going to do without anyone asking those questions in class? Woo! enjoy just reading that note that you got from your students. So at the end of from September to May, our students were in one placement, and Meg was at Framingham High School, again with the kids who, at an extremely tightly tracked school, were sort of in that bottom track. And it was time for Meg to go to her mini placement, to go to a middle school and learn a different context of teaching. And her students, those students who were not necessarily well thought of by all of your colleagues, those students who didn't necessarily want to be in school, wrote this passionate letter to me, to our administration, saying, please don't make her leave us. Please can we keep her? She's the only one who's ever taught us. She's the only one we'll learn from. What will we do without her? And I said, you can come back, but we really think you need to, broaden your learning, explore other levels, explore other kinds of science. And so we sent her off. And then I get an impassioned email from her mentor teacher saying, please send Megan back to us. Please send Meg back. We need her. And can she please do something? Can she please come back? And we did come back with her. And I think it wasn't just because Meg is a lovely human being and a warm human being. It's because she held those students to a different standard than they were being held to. There was a student in your room, I remember, who had never ever contemplated the idea of college. And you had conversations with that kid about your college and your college experience. And you have, I think, changed the trajectory of that child's life forever. And you heard from the parents of that kid who did not expect a whole lot from this kid. So, Meg, I'll say the same thing that everyone else has said. Please come back.
Terry Schaffenster. Terry is a passionate and caring educator who did her history internship at McDevitt Middle School in Waltham. Terry, who was first inspired to teach when she heard Professor Chris Empton from Teachers College speak at Brandeis, which she talked about this morning in her research project. She's been very focused on ways of learning the most effective ways to engage and challenge diverse learners. McDevitt was a great placement for Terry, who learned so much from her mentor teacher that the school hired her as a substitute for a mentor teacher, as a substitute for maternity leave through the end of the school year. She also, Terry learned so much from her students, who in turn learned from her, much more than formal book lessons. Next year, Terry will be in Thailand on a Fulbright fellowship, and we are very proud of her.
John Stathis.
I'm so glad that you are here, John. I'm glad that you're here in so many ways. John gave us a little bit of a scare the other day. And we're so glad that you're here. John has brought to this program, I'm thinking about our interview. I interviewed John on Skype. And while we were doing our interview, his cat kept crawling across the keys of his computer. And John sort of handled this with good humor and with poise and sort of not flummoxed by it at all. And I think that was a great preparatory moment for what you ended up seeing in your classroom. There were lots of wandering cats, and when we think about the work of teaching is corralling cats in the room, John had to do a lot of that. But in my class, in our classroom together, you were the person who would think deeply about what we were talking about, and then when we would have a conversation, you'd look at me and say, I'm going to try that. I'm going to think about that. And there was so much going on, and people giving each other advice, or we'd be talking about reflection, but you were the person who was thinking, I'm going to make that change, and I'm actually going to make that change tomorrow, and I'm going to think hard about what that means, and what I can do in a concrete way that's going to serve these sort of big goals and big ideas in my classroom. And that was such a gift to all of us in the room. And when there would be a small group conversation that needed deepening or pushing or stretching, you were the one doing that deepening and pushing and stretching and let me look at this from another perspective. And I feel like that ability, no matter where you end up teaching or what you end up doing in your life, that ability to sort of take in the feedback, to look at all the different ideas, to pull them together, to corral those cats, and make them make sense is going to serve you so well and has already served your students in ways that I observed, even when they were out running around with buckets full of paper plates full of water doing physics. So thank you for giving us all that.
In addition to majoring in history at Brandeis, Brandon earned highest honors in French and Francophone studies. He did his internship with John Reiner at Newton South High School. John is a graduate of our program, where Brandon flourished in the classroom. Brandon brings his warm and open personality, as well as his respect for the discipline of history to the classroom. Truly a magical combination. He's eager to learn alongside his students as they explore the real stories of people who struggled and did their best, as you can gather from his research on Who Runs the World, Incorporating Female Voices into World History, which he presented this morning. I am confident that Brandon is going to become one of those master history teachers who makes a difference in students' lives and learning. Brandon. Before Victoria entered Brandeis, she was teaching as a peer mentor to Boston Latin School German students. As an undergraduate, she taught in the Lemberg Child Care Center, which is on the Brandeis campus, and as a TA in an animation class. In addition to majoring in English, she earned high honors in her creative writing major. Victoria is one of the most quietly determined people I know. She worked hard to address the teaching challenges within the constraints of the charter school's culture, as she discussed in her research project, Let's Jump and Shout, Movement and Learning in the Classroom. She then chose to extend her internship to work with Jenna Fernandez at Odyssey Middle School in Arlington. I know that Victoria's strong core, intelligence, hard work, and creativity will enable her to figure out the best context for her to enable young students to have their voices heard. Victoria. Mohammed. Mohammed is a talented mathematician. In addition to graduating summa cum laude, a major in mathematics at Brandeis, he literally topped the world in his O-level additional mathematics exam. He says that he loves the critical thinking and creativity inherent in the subject. He says that teaching mathematics truly would be a dream come true because it would allow me to marry the two loves of my life, teaching and mathematics. He is determined to learn as much as he can so that he can return to his home in Pakistan, where there is much need for good mathematics education. Mohammed, again, is one of the hardest workers I have ever observed, whether it's as a student working in admissions, a grader in the mathematics department, or a summer instructor in Pakistan. One other footnote, Muhammad takes the prize for having the worst bike accident this year and then returning so quickly to his internship. We know that he has the vision, determination, love of mathematics, and teaching to make a real difference wherever he is. Muhammad. Eric Yellen, last but certainly not least. Eric brought a very rich background in academics and experiences to the history of MIT. In addition to earning a Master's of Theological Studies at Harvard Divinity School, he worked as a farm assistant and faculty person, running a sustainable, diversified educational farm for a year at Northfield Mount Hermon School. He also, you may not know this, was a volunteer keeper aide at the Invertebrate House at the National Zoo in D.C. Yeah. It was on your resume. In all of these positions and programs, Eric demonstrated amazing organizational skills, uncommon intelligence, and the ability to relate successfully to individual adolescents. He was able to combine these perspectives as an intern at Arlington High School when he began class meetings in his history classroom. It took a while for his students to believe that he really was looking to them for ideas about how the class should be structured and run, but they found out he meant it. Eric is going to be a history teacher in Arlington, Virginia, where he grew up, going from Arlington, Mass. To Arlington, Virginia. And his students and colleagues will be so fortunate to work with this person who has integrity and commitment to help each individual develop into the unique individual that he or she can be. Eric.
Again, we want to thank you all for being here, for supporting these incredible teachers. They have been students, but now they are truly teachers. We don't have hats to throw, but ladies and gentlemen, I give you the graduating class of 2017. Now, MAT students, you have one more obligation, and that's to smile pretty for the camera over here. Loved ones, we invite you to go to the Shapiro Campus Center, which is just out the doors here. And it's a big green building, you really can't miss it. So MAT, smile pretty for the camera, and we will all join you for a bunch of